Edward says, "It was 2 months ago that your breakdown began, and I never noticed it." Lavinia says, "You wouldn't notice anything. You never noticed me." Yeah, people try to excuse their bad behavior and, oh, there's feelings, so, well, people behave themselves. That's the more important thing. Raleigh says, "Now I want to point out to both of you how much you have in common. Indeed, I consider that you are exceptionally well suited to each other. Mr. Chamberlain, when you thought your wife had left you, you discovered to your surprise and consternation that you were not really in love with Miss Copplestone." Lavinia says, "My husband has never been in love with anybody." Well, people think they are, but sometimes it's true. I think it's more common to be true nowadays. Riley says, "And we're not prepared to make the least sacrifice on her account. This injured your vanity. You like to think of yourself as a passionate lover. Then you realized what your wife has justly remarked, that you have never been in love with anybody, which made you suspect that you were incapable of loving. To men of a certain type, the suspicion that they are incapable of loving is as disturbing to their own self-esteem as in cruder men the fear of impotence." Now, I would say that some people, due to drugs or something, at some point become incapable of loving anybody new, but the family and people that they married or would have married of the past, a lot of that definitely seems to remain, but or maybe it's just people don't make the choice to. Lavinia says, "You are cold-hearted, Edward." Riley says, "So you say, Miss Chamberlain. And now let's turn to your side of the problem. When you discovered that your young friend, though you knew in your heart that he was not in love with you, and were always humiliated by the awareness that you had forced him into this position, when I say you discovered that your young friend had actually fallen in love with Miss Copplestone, it took you some time, I have no doubt, before you would admit it. Though perhaps you knew it before he did. You pretended to yourself, I suspect, and for as long as you could, that he was aiming at a higher social distinction than the honor conferred by being your lover, when you had to face the fact that his feelings towards her were different from any you had aroused in him. It was a shock. You had wanted to be loved. You had come to see that no one had ever loved you. Then you began to fear that no one could love you." Edward says, "I'm beginning to feel very sorry for you, Lavinia. You really are exceptionally unlovable, and I never quite knew why. I thought it was my fault." Riley says, "And now you begin to see, I hope, how much you have in common, the same isolation, a man who finds himself incapable of loving, and a woman who finds that no man can love her." Lavinia says, "It seems to me that what we have in common might be just enough to make us loathe one another." Riley says, "See it rather as the bond which holds you together, while still in a state of unenlightenment. You could always say he could not love any woman. You could always say no man could love her. You could accuse each other of your own faults, and so could avoid understanding each other. Now, you have only to reverse the propositions and put them together." Lavinia says, "Is that possible?" Riley says, "If I had sent either of you to the sanatorium in the state in which you came to me, I tell you this, it would have been a horror beyond your imagining, for you would have been left with what you brought with you, the shadow of desires, a prey to the devils who arrive at their plenitude of power when they have you to themselves. Lavinia says, what can we do? When we can neither go back nor forward. Edward, what can we do? Raleigh says, you've answered your own question, though you do not know the meaning of what you said. Edward says, Lavinia, we must make the best of a bad job. That is what he means. Raleigh says, when you find Mr. Chamberlain, the best of a bad job is all any can make of it. Except, of course, the saints, such as those who go to the sanatorium. You will forget this phrase, and in forgetting it, will alter the condition. Lavinia says, Edward, there is that hotel in New Forest, if you want me to go there. The proprietor has just taken over as a friend of Alex's. I could go down with you, and then leave you there, if you want to be alone. Edward says, but I can't go away. I have a case coming on next Monday. Lavinia says, then will you stop at your club? Edward says, no, they won't let me. I must leave tomorrow. But how did you know I was staying at the club? Lavinia says, really, Edward, I have some sense of responsibility. I was going to leave some shirts there for you. Edward says, it seems to me that I might as well go home. Lavinia says, then we can share a taxi and be economical. Edward says, have you anything else to ask him before we go? Edward says, yes, I have, but it's difficult to say. Lavinia says, but I wish you would say it. At least there is something I would like to ask you. Edward says, it's about the future of the others. I don't want to build on other people's ruins. Lavinia says, exactly. I have a question too. Sir Henry, was it you who sent those telegrams? Raleigh says, I think I will dispose of your husband's problem. And then to Edward, your business is not to clear your conscience, but to learn how to bear the burdens of your conscience. With the future of the others, you're not concerned. No vicarious suffering and all that sort of stuff being referred to, or, very unchristian of him to say that, Lavinia says, I think you've answered my question too. They had to tell us themselves that they had made their decision. Edward says, have you anything else to say to us, Sir Henry? Raleigh says, no, not in this capacity. Edward takes out his checkbook. Raleigh raises his hand. My secretary will send you my account. Go in peace and work out your salvation with diligence. Edward and Lavinia exit. Raleigh goes to the couch and lies down. The house telephone rings. He gets up to answer it. Raleigh says, yes, come in. And Julia enters by the side door.